I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I am doing the final installment in my What Am I Teaching in British Literature 3 series. This is the video on postmodernism, our last unit. If you hear a weird sound in the background, my cat is playing with one of his mousy guys. So, we have come to the end of me teaching British literature, and I may have cried a few times at the end of class. It's fine, but I just, these kids, I'll talk a bit more about this at the end. Let's talk about postmodernism. So I went into this like, what the hell is postmodernism? I don't know what to teach for this, but I actually ended up really enjoying this unit. So as usual, I started with a lecture on what is postmodernism, giving historical background, and introducing our major concepts of the unit, which were postcolonialism, fragmentation, intertextuality, and pastiche. So let's jump into what I taught. Our first class after the introduction class was on postcolonialism, and I gave them a selection from Chinua Achebe's An Image of Africa, Racism in Conrad's Heart of Darkness. So this is basically Achebe talking about all of the problems with Heart of Darkness, which we did not read in this class because I'm very uncomfortable teaching it. Also, I hate it. So, you know, I'm not going to teach it. But the students had a really great conversation about this essay, and we ended up being able to kind of bring it into later classes about one of the novels we read. We also then read, and I have no cover on this because it was a used book and it has no dust jacket. We read from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's The Thing Around Your Neck, her short story Jumping Monkey Hill. So I had read this in my post-colonial literature class in undergrad. Actually, I think I read An Image of Africa too. Just stole my professor's whole thing. But this short story, even though Adichie is typically more considered Nigerian and American than Nigeria and British, Jumping Monkey Hill has just this horrible British character that is like the epitome of everything that I wanted to talk about with my students. So this was great. We also watched Adichie's absolutely phenomenal TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, which goes right along with this short story. Highly recommend you go and watch that. So we had fantastic conversation about all of these, and it was just great. Next up, we had a class on Postmodern Poets, and for this I gave them two poems by Seamus Heaney, Digging and Casualty. Casualty is about the Irish Troubles, and we were kind of relating this back to Yeats's poem Easter 1916, which was about the Easter Rebellion. So very similar themes. We noticed a lot of similarities and some differences. Digging is more about history, like family history, and they ended up really loving this one. Like, I was surprised. It's a very short poem, but they were all just like, this is amazing. I was like, all right, hey, if you like it, I'm glad. I like it. It's a good poem. I also gave them a selection from Anne Carson's The Glass Essay. So Anne Carson is Canadian, but if the Norton Anthology of English Literature can include her in the Norton Anthology of English Literature, then I feel she can be in my Britlit class. Anyway, The Glass Essay is really interesting because it interweaves pieces of Carson's life with discussion of the Bronte sisters. So because we had read Jane Eyre, of course, this was very interesting. Next up, we had a class on retellings, and for this we read Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber. We also read the original Bluebeard so that they would have something to, you know, work, like, be like, here's the original, because it turned out most of them were not familiar with Bluebeard, which my husband had been like, who's Bluebeard? Is he a pirate? And I was just like, But I didn't realize that most of my kids wouldn't know Bluebeard either. Which makes sense because like you don't tell that story to children anymore. So that was the correct decision to give them both the original and this retelling. This was the best class we had in the entire semester. So my advisor, who is the chair of the English department, came and observed me teaching this. I was so nervous. I warned my kids ahead of time. I was like, so the chair of the English department is coming, so make me look good, okay? They were like, absolutely, do you want us to dress up? Like, do you want us to look really professional? I was like, you don't need to do any of that. Just like come and talk, which they usually do. But I just wanted to make sure that we really had a solid class that day. And my word, we did. The chair of the English department was absolutely blown away by how they handled this story. This has murder. It has some pretty uncomfortable sexual scenes that are not quite consensual. And they handled this so incredibly well. We had absolutely amazing discussion about it. I was just so blown away by these kids. I love them so much. But yes, we had a great discussion. Pippin, get your tail out of the camera. But yeah, the best class we had. Dude, you're moving the camera. This is not acceptable. So part of why I wanted to specifically look at a retelling was because our novel is also a retelling. This is Wide Sargasso Sea by Jane Reese. This is a retelling prequel of Jane Eyre, focused on the character of Bertha Mason, who here is called Antoinette. So we see her childhood in Jamaica and how she came to marry Rochester, who is unnamed in this book, which is really interesting. As you can see, I've got my tabs as usual. Oh, Pippin is interested in the tabs. Do you like the tabs? So we spent, I guess, 2 classes on this, and they really enjoyed it. We had a lot of interesting discussions, bringing it back to Jane Eyre, bringing it back to several other things that we had read. Of course, because Jane Eyre utilizes Bluebeard, we talked about this in relation to the Bloody Chamber. And of course, we had multiple houses burning down in this, which my students loved because there were a lot of buildings burning down this semester, okay? And actually, I have a little card from one of my students. I'll talk about that at the end, but you've probably been seeing it in the background for a bit now. So yeah, we had a great time with this book. I had a student write an excellent essay on it. We next read a play. This is the only play that we read the whole semester. This is Arcadia by Tom Stoppard. It is one of my favorites, honestly. I read this in my British literature survey class in undergrad, so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna bring it in. So this has a dual timeline. It takes place in the Regency period, but then also in the present day being 90s, because that's when it was written. And in the 19th century plotline, we are following Thomasina Coverley, who is a young girl who's a mathematical genius, but it's not really realized because it's the 19th century and she's a 13-year-old girl. And she has this tutor, Septimus Hodge, who there's a lot going on with Septimus Hodge. We realized about this time, we're like, wow, all the men in these books really suck. Oops. Anyway, so then in the present time period, there are these several scholars looking at various things, and one of them believes that one of them believes that Lord Byron was at the house and fought in a duel with this man Ezra Chater, who was a poet, and killed him. So in the 19th century, we see what actually happened, and then in the present day, we are seeing kind of what they think happened, how they're uncovering it. one of the big themes is how we will never actually know entirely what happened, because even though at the end they get a sense of what happened, they still don't know everything about what went down. So that was a really interesting theme to look at in this class, where we have been looking at all these old texts. So, and also Byron is a character, except we never see him on stage. So he's just like looming in the background constantly. And my kids loved that. They were like, of course Lord Byron's a character, and he's just like looming in the background. Of course he is. So it was pretty great. We spent a lot of this semester just kind of bashing Lord Byron. But he deserves it, so it's fine. Not that his poetry's bad, he's just Byron, you know. So we had a lot of fun with this. I had so much fun teaching it to them. And then we had a postmodern film course. And for this, we watched 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle. Holy crap, I had never seen it. My advisor suggested it. He was like, yeah, 28 Days Later, I teach that one sometimes. It's a good postmodern film. I'm like, okay. Like, what's this about? It's about zombies. I'm like, all right, why not? We had like a streaming party. I brought them soda and popcorn and candy. And we just had the best time watching this. It is absolutely wild. There is so much going on, though, relating back to the Gothic and like the terror versus horror that we'd been talking about back in the Romantic period. There was this sense of like the city as dangerous and nature as safe. And there was this whole deal with British identity. There was so much. I had a few kids write papers on this, and there was just so much, and we ended up having a fantastic time with it. Although I will say, when the movie started and we were watching it, we were just kind of like, what? I actually had to watch it twice. I got home from the watching party, and I said to my husband, I was like, okay, you need to watch this with me, because we still have access since I rented it on Amazon, and I need to talk to you about this. I need you to experience this. It was a wild ride. I liked it, but it was definitely not what I was expecting it to be at all. Absolutely crazy. My students really had fun with it though, so that's what I wanted. I wanted them to be able to have fun. Our final class was titled Literature as Art, Art as Literature. And for this, we were looking at Kabe Wilson, who is a multimedia artist. And his two big pieces, or I guess they're kind of one piece altogether, but The Dreadlock Hoax and Of One Woman or So by Olivia Ngoufrey. So what he has done with Of One Woman or So, he has taken the text of A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, and he has arranged the words into entirely new text. He only uses words that are in A Room of One's Own. He only uses the words the same amount of times they are used in A Room of One's Own. And the title of One Woman or So is A Room of One's Own Rearranged, and it's by Olivia Ngoufrey, and that is Virginia Woolf rearranged. So, absolutely crazy. It blew my kids' minds. I had a professor teach this in my feminist theory course, so it blew my mind too when I first saw it. And then The Dreadlock Hoax is a speech that he gave at Virginia Woolf's house, dressed as Virginia Woolf in drag. And it turns out that it seems like it's this introduction to Of One Woman or So. That's what it is. But it turns out that it is every word of Virginia Woolf's essay Craftsmanship, also rearranged. It's amazing. My students absolutely loved this. I'm so glad that I chose to teach it. Because, of course, we read A Room of One's Own. We worked with Mrs. Dalloway. And so then we get to see this kind of tribute to her while also completely reworking the text into something new that deals with a woman who is at Cambridge. She is a mixed race woman, I believe, Olivia Nungaufrey, and she ends up getting fed up with the basically white colonial everything of Cambridge, and she decides she's going to burn down the libraries. We had so much fun with this. I'm so glad that I taught this. I cannot find the full text of One Woman or So anywhere, so we watched an interview with Kabe Wilson on it, and then we did read the text of the Dreadlock Hoax and listened to him read it, which is really how you need to do it. So they really liked this, and I'm so glad it ended on something really just new and fun. We talked about, is this literature? Because Kabe Wilson is an artist, first and foremost. So we're like, okay, is it literature to take someone else's words and rearrange them like this? We decided, yes, it absolutely is literature. And the amount of work that goes into it, my God. So it was just great discussion, great class. For their final paper, they had to take a postmodern text. It could be any that we read. I also gave them a list of ones they could pick from, and I said, if you find one that you want to talk about, just run it by me, and you can do that. And they needed to look at how does it embody the postmodern concepts we've discussed, but also how does it relate back to at least one previous period of British literature. So these essays were great. I had so much fun with them. I also gave them the option, if they wanted to, because somebody asked if they could, and I was like, yeah, sure, to do what Kabe Wilson did and take one of the texts we have read and rework it. So I had a student do that with Rudyard Kipling's The White Man's Burden, which we read back for our Victorian unit. And I was just stunned. He did so good. He rearranged it into a poem basically criticizing colonization and imperialism. It was fantastic. And then he wrote like 5 pages explaining what he was doing and why he chose to do it, and kind of how Kabe Wilson inspired him, but also how he differed from Kabe Wilson in that Wilson sees his work as a kind of tribute to Virginia Woolf, as well as a kind of partnership with Virginia Woolf because he's using her words, whereas my student saw his working with the Kipling poem as kind of not a tribute to Kipling, but like a kind of, I can't remember the word he used, but basically like calling Kipling out on being racist. So that was great. I had students write about Wide Sargasso Sea, about Arcadia, about 28 Days Later. I had 2 students write about White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi, which I had suggested to them. And I had a student do this fantastic essay on the musical Mamma Mia. It was so good. And her title was, It's Very Greek. And then something about Mamma Mia as postmodern. It was fantastic. I had so much fun reading it. And I told them, I was like, look, what I want most is to be entertained. So entertain me. And they came through. They were fantastic. I absolutely loved teaching this class. It was so good. So yeah, that was the end. And these students really saved teaching for me, because I had been coming off of 7 semesters of first year writing with freshmen who were not English majors, who did not want to be there and who did not care. And like, frankly, I don't really care about first year writing either. Like, I'm not a comp person. I'm just not. I'm a literature person. So having the opportunity to teach literature to this group of students who really wanted to be there and was just so engaged was absolutely amazing. And I told them, like, you have saved teaching for me. I thought that I wanted out of this career, but now I don't, because I realized how great it can be. And they all told me they had a really good time in my class. And now I will show you the little card. So one of my students gave me a little card. She hand drew it. I don't know if it's gonna focus well. As you can see, it is a burning house because, you know, Thornfield, but also tons of other things. And then on the inside, she has written what I have learned from British lit when in doubt, arson. Because we just had so many things where we had so many texts where houses were just burning down. So it was our running joke. This is just so sweet. I'm keeping it on my bookshelf next to my Wuthering Heights embroidery. It was such a privilege to teach this course. And I'm kind of sad to not be teaching it anymore because I'm actually not teaching next year. I have a different graduate assistantship doing something else that will give me more time to work on my dissertation, which is good, but I'm also sad because now I know how wonderful it can be to teach. And yeah. So, that is what I taught in British Literature 3. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you read any of these? Have you checked any of these texts out because you saw this video? How did you like them? What did you read for the postmodern part of your British literature survey? Or did you have a postmodern part of your British literature survey? Because I know some kind of just cut off with modernism. So, it has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.